we have enough time at the end to go through that. So does anyone have any issues with the agenda tonight? Okay, then let's go ahead and jump in. We do have 2 more task force meetings scheduled, both for next Monday, the 24th of January, and Monday, January 31st. So anyway, that's all we have scheduled at this point. We have 2 items that we'll be talking about tonight, including community health and earned density, which is just the initial discussion on earned density. Beyond that, we still have land use to get through, and then final approval, or at least final interim approval of environment, and then also an equity review, at least. So is there anything else on upcoming meetings or topics anyone wants to bring up now? Len, I see your hand up.
Yep, thank you, Walter, for acknowledging the visual hand.
Yes.
I wanted to let the task force know. I wanted to let the task force know that the land use working group is anticipating sending out a package of materials on Thursday. So we wanted to get through this evening's earned density discussion, but there will be a package for land use that will be sent out on Thursday. So I just wanted to give folks an update on that.
All right, Lynn, thank you very much. I know that's a little shorter than our 5 working day request,
I know.
but hopefully
We're doing our best.
that will still work for everybody. Okay, Lynn, thank you for that announcement. Any questions or comments on future meetings?
Walter, this is David Vanell.
David, I see a virtual hand for you. Go ahead.
The housing thing will come before the group next week. John Carter and I and several staffers had a lengthy conversation, and I'll be making sure that Jose gets the few changes that John wanted made, and we should be able to zip through that next Monday.
All right, good. Thank you, David. Did not have housing listed there. So thank you for letting us know that and for polishing that off.
I do want to say that my name came up last meeting. I was
Yes, hi,
sick of
Jan.
the dog, but it came up in relations to a comment I made about single family living on a one story. We were talking about condos and that sort of thing. I was just thinking about the continuum of life. In other words, from young adult to nursing home, to assisted living to nursing home, and that sort of thing. But I'm not sure whether that's appropriate for the county to be taking care of that, or whether we should just be letting the nursing homes come in and do that. That's all I had meant, was continuity of life.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Yeah, there was some, thank you for explaining that. We weren't sure. All right, very good. Any other questions, comments on any of those upcoming task force? Okay. All right, then let's jump right into community health. Item number 3 on the agenda. This has been before the task force was discussed, and Michelle, I'll hand it over to you as the topic lead on community health.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, is Jose on today?
Jose is here. Sorry I'm late, guys.
Sorry about that. Okay, are you able to pull up the draft that was sent around?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I gave you presenter privileges, but I'll get Lisa to give it back to me.
Okay, cool.
You're amazing, Jose.
Thank you, Lynn. Is the PDF okay, Michelle?
No, the Word doc.
Okay, give me 1 second. I can do that. There we are.
Okay, great. All right, let's see. So we have been here before. And where we are right now is, we've received comments, we've addressed them, and we're ready to move forward to bring this to staff. So tonight, obviously, we're going to be asking for a vote. But if anyone has anything in particular that they want to bring up, I think that's fine, and we can open that now.
Thank you, Michelle. Does anyone have comments or questions? Oh, I see Mike. Yes. Go ahead, Mike.
Hello. I just wanted to know how we should go over comments that we provided that were, just basically told we're not going to do what you suggested. Is there a way to bring those up in front of the group and have it reviewed, or wasn't sure on that?
I think we addressed the comments you brought up, but if you want to bring some up, by all means, Mike, go for it.
Well, yeah, let's be fair. Your use of the word address means we're not going to do that, or we don't agree. And I just think that's kind of unfair. So
I'm the case sometimes, but if you'd like to go ahead, by all means.
Sure. Can I share my screen, Jose?
Yeah, sure, Mike. Give me 1 moment. You should be able to share your content now, Mike.
Okay. Figure out which one it is. I think. Can you see a Word document?
Yes, we can. It's a little, well, I know for me it's a little small, but.
All right. I will. I'm not sure how I can make it much bigger. Let me.
Bigger is always better.
Yeah.
Mike, down in the lower right, there's a
Yep.
sliding scale. You can increase the percentage. There you go.
Great.
So this was in the below the section with the census tracts. It was on page 3 of the previous draft from 12/21. It was just another one of these. You can see where I have must crossed out and should instead. This was a case where I thought we should encourage things, but to say must on all these principles that will be in there is just a little bit more than is necessary. I'm just going to run through. I only have like 3 or 4 comments. I'll run.
Does everyone agree with Mike? Or, we obviously presented that we disagree and we think health should be prioritized. So what do we have, everyone?
Do not agree.
Well, let's give Mike a chance to explain what he's talking about, because I've raised similar questions about other portions where I just thought must was the wrong word on some of the
That's great.
proposed. So we'll talk about that.
We should do those individually, but here's one where Mike doesn't think that the principles must be adhered to. So let's talk about it. Should they or should they not? I think they should. When we looked at it, we thought that they should, and we thought that health should be prioritized.
This is Lynn. I'm raising my physical hand instead of my virtual hand.
Yeah,
but
Lynn, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I do think that the principles must be adhered to. I think that what we have seen is that the Reston comprehensive plan, the integrity of the comprehensive plan has been compromised. And it's very important that we make sure that development in Reston is adhered to. And I think that must is an appropriate word for this section. Thank you.
I agree.
Agree.
Agreed.
What about the word will?
Well, it's always good.
I don't know that there's a difference as far as how this is actually followed through. I don't think that, I mean, the point is we're saying that they must be considered and factored into approvals in the development process. My understanding is must and will hold the same force unless somebody on staff wants to correct us. That's pretty much what we have been told now multiple times, I think.
Right.
This is Shane. I don't know if we're putting hands up, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure
Shane.
why must belongs in the comprehensive plan. These are recommendations. It says it right there in the sentence, and so I'm just not sure why must is important, because they should be considered. They're recommendations. It's a comprehensive plan. It's not a zoning ordinance.
So Shane,
And so I'm not sure how those two kind of play together.
yeah, we've been told multiple times now that if we use shoulds, that those will not be required and will not necessarily happen. So
But
we have been told by staff that the language that would be appropriate to use would be a must or a will.
and I maybe I missed the meeting where they said that, but I guess my thinking is, again, we're in a comprehensive plan, we're in a recommendation kind of situation. And so I think we're overplaying what the comprehensive plan really does in context with zoning.
This is David
Yeah,
Powell again. And in point of fact, must or will or should, the sentence says be considered and factored into. That doesn't mean that they're going to be adhered to. None of those words demand that they be adhered to.
Should does not, but must and will do. And Barbara Byron is here and can explain the difference, as she has explained twice previously.
Hi,
Actually,
Tim.
yeah, Barbara,
Can you hear me,
please.
Tim?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my video is not on. So I have had a concern through all the deliberations that Shane is correct, that the comprehensive plan really does use the word should. And when we interpret should, we mean that these are things that we expect to have happen. It is not typical for the comprehensive plan to use words like must and will. The county attorney's office has said don't use shall, but in our mind, will and must are kind of akin to shall. So we feel strongly that the comprehensive plan should use words like should, or if it's really important to you, as I've said before, phrases like it is expected that.
Thank you, Barbara. Other thoughts? Anyone else have their hand up?
Specific sections.
I have my physical hand up.
All right, Lynn.
So I would make, based on what Barbara just said, I would suggest that we amend that statement to read to that end, the recommendation included, or it is expected that the recommendation included with each of these principles will be considered and factored into approvals for development proposals affecting community health.
Second that.
This is Mike. That works for me.
Okay. Does anyone have any concerns about that construct? All right, no objections. Okay, then Mike, keep going. I think you had
Sure.
a couple
Yep.
others.
Yeah, down in the let's see what it's page 10 of the previous version. Presumably it's still page 10. This again gets back to that how do we make sure, or how do we force, or whatever the right word is, the residential developments in the TSAs to contribute to the Reston paths. You can see I have some language that's actually stronger than, in a way it's stronger because it says developments that include residential must join Reston Association rather than talking about proffers that get negotiated. And I know that Michelle and Jennifer have said that we haven't had much luck with getting people in RA, but my review of the existing version of the comprehensive plan, nowhere does it say must join Reston Association. If I zoom back out, I have over my comment on the left-hand side. Whoa, that's a little too far. That if you look at the existing plan, all it really says is development within TSAs can become better integrated, blah, 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 blah. This can be achieved through incorporation into the existing Reston Association or the Reston Town Center. Each of these indicated a willingness. So I have not found anything, and if I'm just being mistaken and it's actually there's not been anything in the comp plan that says developments must join RA. So I thought this would be a better way to achieve what we're trying to do here.
And Mike, you're talking about developments within RA, right?
Yeah.
No,
No, the TSAs.
Well, whatever this section covers.
it would
This is-
cover everything in this plan. So
Yeah.
it would cover everything.
But if you were in Reston Town Center Association, you would not have to pay Reston Association dues and Reston Town Center Association dues, right?
Yeah, maybe that's a technicality we would have to put some words to make sure that doesn't, double jeopardy there. Yeah, that makes sense, Gary.
Walter, if I may make a comment.
Yes, John.
First of all, I'd like to see if Larry Butler's here because he can do a much better job of this than I. Larry, are you here tonight?
I am.
Do you want to address this? Because I know there are situations where residential developments joining Reston Association without the proper agreements can lay very onerous burdens on Reston Association. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, but first and foremost, the question of whether the language should be must, the county nor anybody else can force a property owner to join RA. It is a voluntary act. We have been successful with a handful, but that's where the owner of the property says, I want to subject my development to the covenants of Reston Association. I don't know if the comp plan language is really something for the county attorneys, probably, but to say must, it's very strong, but you're forcing somebody to subject their property to a set of covenants that they may or may not have an interest in. So it might be worth getting the county attorneys to weigh in on that particular word. I know that the current plan, it's encouraged that they join either RA or Reston Town Center Association. But again, in a Dillon's rule state that favors property owners, I'm not sure that that is an appropriate language to have in there. That's just my spin on it.
Larry, is it not true that sometimes residential developments in the TSAs have wanted to join RA, but in doing so, they tried to get us to undertake very onerous maintenance responsibilities for parks and things like that. Is that not also a layer of the problem here?
It could be. We haven't encountered one of those yet, but certainly it could be, depending upon how those negotiations go.
But and Larry knows this much better than I, but in my 5 years on the board, we always try to get residential developments to join RA, but it has to be right for them and for us.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm just trying to address what I agree with Michelle and Jennifer is, you know, it's important is how can these hundreds of extra people use the paths or thousands of extra people and help pay for the maintenance? I didn't think proffers, I don't know, I didn't think that was going to work, so I tried to put in something else. Maybe this is something staff can help us word or I don't know. I just was trying to help here, make it a little bit more forceful.
And RA is grateful for your work, Mike. It's not always as simple as it may seem, is what we're saying.
I think one point, though, that is simple is that we have this community resource that does need to be funded by the entire community. That is why we were aware of these factors, and that's why we focused on at least making sure that our paths are maintained and that all are contributing. So I think this is another one that we think it should go forward to staff with that goal in mind of ensuring that all community members are contributing to the maintenance of the path, whether they are a member of RA, whether they are not, whether they are a member of Reston Town Center, whatever, we still all have this communal resource. So we would like to move this forward, and unless others disagree, I think the language should stay in as is. This is all going to go before staff anyway. So
What do you think, Larry?
Well, as I said, I think staff in the county attorney's office would be interested in what they have to say about it. I mean, I appreciate, Mike, what you're trying to do, and I fully agree that there's a lot of our facilities that are, you know, open to everybody, you know, even though they're private. So trying to find additional funding is always a great thing. So I do appreciate that effort, but let's run it by the staff and the county attorney, I think.
Mike and Larry, this is David Vanel. Can I ask a question, please? I fully agree that it would be wonderful if residents were required to join RA, pay the dues, et cetera, et cetera. I'm wondering, and the staff certainly should be able to answer this, I'm wondering whether the contribution amount, if we go with proffers, whether the contribution amount is dependent upon the size of the facility that's being built. Is it a negotiable amount of money? Is it a flat rate amount of money? Is it dependent upon how many people are occupying the building? And if so, you know, it might still work as proffers if the county is able to set the amount of money that a particular development has to contribute.
I don't know the answer, David, on that. You know, if proffers are the way that everyone thinks the way is to go, then, you know, it'll be a negotiation, I'm sure. Even, you know, even what I put in must join RA, maybe it could be, they don't have to join RA fully, but just cover the pass. I don't know. I'm, you know, if this is all going to be reviewed anyway, I'm not going to sit here and, you know, fight for another 20 minutes on my language. You know, it's just
the whole thing, everything that is being written, not just in this chapter, the whole thing is going to be reviewed and edited by staff. Right now, we just need to move this forward and get it before staff.
This is Barbara. Can I just clarify? So when we've been asking applicants to join RA, we haven't set an amount. I don't believe, maybe one of the attorneys on the call could answer, but I believe that we would just expect it to be at the same dues structure that others within RA are paying.
That has not occurred, right, Larry? Aren't some joining at a lower due structure?
Now, the only one that joined, that was the very first one, which was Comstock, and that was a completely different animal. Now, the others have come in as full dues paying members.
And I think what we're proposing here is a little easier for non-RA members, would be a dwelling unit fee, yearly fee to help with the path, not necessarily the entire dues. It's expensive for RA to have a zillion members. You know, that doesn't necessarily work well for RA, but there does need to be community sharing of the costs of these amenities that are being used by the entire public and being used in marketing of the TSAs. So that, I think, is the difference, is we're not necessarily requesting the entire amount, but a portion to fund and maintain pathways, 55 miles thereof. Thank you.
There's just one technical comment, perhaps. Proffers are voluntary. They're not required. So I wonder if proffers is the right word. And there could be some projects that don't have proffers. So that might not be the best language there. It's a technicality. But again, proffers are supposed to be offers from the developer, not required. They're voluntary, and not all projects have proffers. No. And I think that issue of, does this cover RTC, the town center where they already have an association, and areas in the neighborhoods that are not part of Reston Association? There are some of those as well. So does this cover those?
Yeah, John, those are good points. I think, oh, did you want to say something else there?
I just want to say, as written, this would cover anything under this comp came before as the development application. And so, you know, again, I mean, I think the point with some of this is, yes, we could benefit from staff's help here. Part of this is wanting to make sure that we're at least putting forward the goals. And so this is a goal. If we need to finesse the language, I mean, you know, ultimately we do need staff's assistance.
Yeah, I would finesse that proffer. Proffers, I don't think it's quite the right term.
Yeah, I think this is helpful. I think staff knows. I think we all get it in terms of the idea. Somebody have one final comment, and then we'll move on.
No, I just say, I guess, still concerned on the double jeopardy. Our TCA could say, well, why aren't we charging for, you know, a lot of things that they provide to everybody in Reston? So just concerned about that.
Point noted.
Barry, I never walk on your paths in RTC.
This is David. I just want to understand, what is this path system? Is it just RA maintained paths, or is it any paths that lead to Metro? Because we're going to be walking over a lot of these communities to have access to Metro, and they're putting in things like the community circuit. Is the intent then that Rest RA would contribute or maintain those? I think that was John's indirect question, that or point that he was bringing.
Yes.
It is not the intent that RA would maintain the paths outside of RA. What we're saying is that the RA paths in themselves are a unique community feature, and one of the last features we have. I mean, come on. And so, you know, this is a community resource, and it's focused very much on the RA paths. I will say this too, the paths that are going to the TSA, I would remind everyone that the TSA, you know, benefits greatly from taxpayer funding to make Metro happen. And so, you know, I don't think that we really want to compare the two.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle, and everybody. I think we get it. There are issues about our TCA we'll have to look at. And frankly, the Transportation Service District residents paid 2.1 cents per $100 of assessed value more in the Transportation Service District to pay for transportation improvements too. But I get it. Right. The trail system is unique, that RA maintains and heavily used by a lot of folks. So I get it, and that's certainly something I think staff will need to look at, and frankly, John and I will need to look at too. So, okay, any very good discussion. Anything else on that one before we go to Mike's next one?
That's it, Walter. I'm not. The other two things are not really. I don't need to tie everybody up, so I'll stop sharing right now. That's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike. All right, Michelle, it's back to you.
Okay, and then I think it's open to anyone else if you have other things that you'd like to discuss.
Yeah, this is Bill. I mean, I
Bill.
raised.
Oh, yes, sorry, Bill. I missed
I
it.
raised a few issues again. I think generally in the must category, and questioned the appropriateness of it. Examples included the must have 2 grocery stores in 2 of the TSAs. One of them will have 3, but really it's not clear there's going to be enough density to ever support a second grocery store in a particular location. So I think it's desirable, it'd be great, but must seems too strong.
So let's discuss that one before we move on, because we very much disagree. If one of the goals of the TSA is to get car trips lowered, you cannot do that if you cannot walk to grocery stores. We have looked at what the distance would be to get to Whole Foods from Comstock's building on the new building, the new parcel that they own. We've also looked at Campus Commons and across the street, across the Dulles Toll Road at Midline. Those are not walking distances for an urban area for grocery stores. If we cannot get people food, they will use their cars and they will use them frequently. This is not a difficult concept. We have to make sure that they have access to basic needs and walking distance. And so we do feel very strongly about this one. So I think this is one, do we need grocery stores to make a TSA work? We think we do, and we don't think that the current grocery store in Wheelie is going to meet the needs of where the new development is coming in. So this is one, if others want to weigh in, go for it. But I think this is something we should have a discussion on.
So let me just add a comment, and that is, we still haven't seen the urban density section. We haven't seen any further version of the land use section. If there's enough density, I mean, if this is an urban area, it'll work. What I've been concerned about is all the pressure to push down the density. And the key to making any of these things work is to have a balance of enough people living and walking nearby to support it. If we got enough people to support it, I'm all for it. So.
Yeah. Okay, does anyone else think we should take that out? Again, we think that we need to make sure that there's a grocery store in walking distance of the east side of the Wheelie metro station. Otherwise, we do not think it is possible to meet the TSA's goals.
Yeah, I think, this is Mike, I think we should take it out.
Hey, this is David Gill. I also agree with Mike on that. I think what I struggle with is just how do you define what is a grocery store? It's very hard to define what a grocery store is providing for those specific amenities. To be frank, a CVS covers an awful lot of those same amenities.
No, it doesn't. It does not cover the same amenities.
Please let me finish. There's also other grocery store concepts. A Wawa is practically a grocery store concept. An Aldi is practically a grocery store concept. A Trader Joe's is practically a grocery store concept. All fit into roughly the same square footage and could provide a lot of these same uses. I just think that it's hard to put staff in the position of saying what is a grocery store and what isn't. And frankly, as the shopping models evolve, we're getting things like Amazon's fresh markets and models like that where it's a lot more delivery oriented. What is truly a grocery store at the end of the day? And I just think calling it a grocery store unduly puts a burden on there. I think your concept about providing services within walking distance, providing health options with walking distance, those get at the same idea. But saying we need a grocery store is a really difficult line to figure out. I really think it is.
So I've raised my concern and bracketed it with the density question. I'm happy to let it go to the staff. And I certainly support the concept. If we got the people, let's have it.
I'd like to comment, this is Tammy. Midline was approved with a grocery store. Tall Oaks was approved assuming Midline was going to be able to function as their quote sort of close neighbor grocery store. Then I happened to ask the question at the last Midline meeting of the Planning and Zoning Committee before they got approved, And lo and behold, they couldn't get anybody to go in there. Now that was then. I'm not sure where they are now, but you know, we were promised a grocery store with midline. If I had not asked who's the grocery store, we would still be assuming there was going to be a grocery store there. So I don't care if it's an Aldi, a Lidl, a Trader Joe's, a small independent, but there needs to be food purchase ability in a TSA, as Michelle has stated. Thank you.
But how do you force that to happen, right? If the market, you know, we tried to get grocery stores into Lake Ann for years, but the space just wasn't right. How do we force the market, for lack of a better term? I mean, it may be that some of these things get approved without a grocery store moves in, or vice versa. You know, to David's point, the market is changing, and you know, you've got Amazon as an option. You've got, you know, they're able to do different things now, and your grocery store experience may not look the same 10 years from now as it does now. And so I support the concept of, you know, I live just outside of Reston, so I support the concept of having good grocery offerings. I've got Giant and Trader Joe's near me, and that's very convenient. But you know, I'm not sure that we can keep from happening in Tall Oaks or Lake Ann what happened, you know, in terms of grocery stores. The marketing wasn't right for the stores, and it didn't happen. But I think, you know, a lot of these grocery stores right now are wanting to go into these developments. But it all matters on, you know, like Trader Joe's won't do anything unless they have all these metrics that work out. And if the metrics don't work out, they don't want to come. And so I think we're trying to force the market to do something it may or may not want to do.
And one of those metrics, to be honest with you, is parking. And I think that may be why Midline had a problem getting somebody to come in there, because God knows there's going to be enough density around there.
I mean, it could be. We had with Capital One and Wegmans, we had to allocate a certain number of spaces to them, and so that is a challenge at times when you've got grocery stores that want a certain number of spaces. You've got some office tenants that want the same, and so sometimes it's a push pull, and you've got to figure out what uses kind of fit in where your parking is. But you know, I think the reality is we've got to make sure that we're not going to have empty storefronts, right? Because you know, that's, I think, going to be a bigger problem than anything else if we end up with these empty storefronts. I mean, Lake Ann, they ended up having to put the community center in there because nothing seemed to be able to survive in that old Safeway space. So I don't think you want to have a situation where you've essentially painted the market into a corner where, you know, we can't force Giant to come in. We can't force Safeway to come in. We can certainly encourage them. They pay good rent. It's something that a lot of these people want to be able to have anchor their developments. But, you know, what happens 10 years from now might not be what happens now.
And that's actually I'm sorry, you know, that's actually something that I agree with Shane. That was an issue that I was having with the section, is having a detrimental impact on a development if we cannot get the retailer to come into the space. You know, the damage of having space reserved for a specific entity and not able to fill it on that development, I think needs to be considered.
Small Latino markets that exist in Lake Ann. We have two of them. One provides more consecrated food like plantains and bananas and fruits and flour and things in a dairy case. And the other one does pretty much the same, not in many vegetables, but it has the same. They're wildly used because that's the only place people can go for food. Of course, the markup is also pretty bad, but you build it and people will go because they need to pick up some extra supplies. I think that the whole concept of Reston, living and working in restaurants, fine, but if you can't afford to eat in Reston, then you've got a real problem. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for their comments. Bill, can we go back to the language and any specific suggestion you have on this?
Just changing it to, should, it would be ideal. We would like, but it just, I'm not sure must works. The concept I'm in favor of. I just don't know that it works. We've seen places where they've lost grocery stores and I don't know. Again, I'm happy to let this one go to the staff. They've heard the discussion at this point, and maybe we don't need to, duke it out. And I'm not sure we'll get a happy answer for anybody if we do. So.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Bill. If there are no
I
objections, Bill, let's go on to the next point that you have.
So there are a couple other things, again, in the same category. Requirements that every development have a playground. I don't think that's practical. Every couple blocks or every block or two, sure, but not every development. The idea that I'm not sure where the public restrooms wound up, whether it still requires every mixed-use building to have a public restroom without any permissible signs that say for patrons only or anything like that. I'm not sure that's viable. I'm happy to have the county build public restrooms. It would be of great convenience for many people. And on, and there are a few other things, every development with 10 dwelling units has to do certain things. And, having exercise equipment if you live in a townhouse, that's what you do it in your basement. You can do it in your garage. My son does. You don't need special equipment. Again, there are a lot of things people can do. I would just tone some of those down without resisting the general direction that I know that Michelle is interested in heading. That's all. And I'll stop there.
Okay, Bill, appreciate your comments, and also I think staff heard you. I heard you as well, but thank you for letting us move on. Michelle, did you have any other comments at this point?
I mean, we do disagree on the ones that were included. Some of what Bill said was not included in the draft that we are discussing tonight. On playgrounds, that is something that we do believe very strongly in. Also, we'll note that, relying on another parcel owner's playground does not work, because that might be a private playground that you really should not be accessing. But also, it just doesn't work in general to rely on someone else's playground. Sorry.
I would just say, Michelle, all the provisions for developers to provide park and open space, it's always preceded by the phrase publicly accessible. So I don't think they'd be surprised if neighbors use the playground.
Okay, great. All right, and Jose, how do you want to move on? Should we also ask for attendees? Any comments there?
Yeah. Did you want me to show attendees how to raise their hand real quickly?
Yeah, if you could, just real quick.
Okay. Give me 1 second. So I'm going to share my event window. So hopefully everyone can see this. And for attendees to raise their hand, kind of like Bill Pettivent has it up, it's this little hand button right here that says raise hand. It's next to the megaphone. So as you see my name, you should be able to raise your hand if you have a comment, and either me or Lisa can unmute you. That's all, Supervisor.
All right, thank you, Jose. It's kind of weird to see my face up there twice. So do any attendees have, go ahead and raise your hand if there are any comments, or any task force members for that matter. Anyone have any final comments or questions?
Yeah, I guess I do.
Yeah, Gary.
I'm struggling here a little bit on my iPad. Michelle, the responses back from Reston Hospital, how did you treat that? I couldn't see how you treated. I thought they made a pretty good response to the comments that, you were interested in.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, so they actually did not dispute the language that their charges are higher. They are higher. They also then provided information that said if you looked at the average of their contractual discounts and then you averaged that and you applied that to their average charge for a specific service, you would see that that might be their price and it might be in line. However, that math and analysis just doesn't work. That's not how you can use averages. And so they claim that their prices are in line. However, when we actually looked at some of their prices that they're required to post under federal law, we can see that for the ones that we can compare, and specifically looking at the vaginal birth, which they highlighted, we can see that, they say that, give me 1 second. Using their math, they say that a C-section rather should be $9,309. But if you look on their prices that they post, and this is prices, not charges, you will see that those insured by Anthem, which has 42% of the large group insurance market in Northern Virginia, the rate is actually, or the price rather, is $11,371. And it's significantly higher than what we're able to see from other places. And specifically in what's really noticeable is in Arlington. The one hospital in Arlington on charges and prices, from what we're able to see, are significantly less. So we still have the problem. Why are people in Reston paying more for healthcare than those in Arlington? What we've included is factually accurate. So their response was not complete and simply did not dispute what was said.
Gary, you're on mute.
I also want to point out that the piece about Reston Hospital, the reason why it's even in this section is because we need to, as Reston in our comp plan, say why it is we need the things that we need in our comp plan that are different than what Fairfax County would have overall. So that's what that section is all about. We have one major hospital that serves Reston proper, and that was, so we have to use Reston hospital data in order to show that as a growing community and one that will almost double in population, we need affordable health services to remain in Reston and even grow in Reston. We did ask also Reston Hospital the different areas that they plan on growing in, and made sure that they were either included in this version, or we also used the public health officials with Fairfax County. We had interviews with them. We had interviews with lots of people in what Reston services are needed in the future here. So, some of the beginning language is just background information. It's really the recommendations of this section that we should be concentrating on.
Yeah, I just, from my knowledge, I thought their response was from, working with Medicare and Blue Cross Blue Shield and some of the others, that there isn't much difference there.
So on Medicare, you're right. You're probably going to be paying a price in line with other hospitals, because Medicare has a significant market power to negotiate different rates and simply won't pay more. And what we're talking about specifically are charges and prices paid by those of us not on Medicare, and that's the big.
No, I hear you. It's just
Hey, Ryan.
If you
Can I give you a little bit? I'm on the phone with somebody else. Okay, I'll call you back.
Yeah, Gary, go ahead, and if everyone else could mute.
So I think that.
In fact, if you want to know about Medicare pricing, it's
No.
Well, no, it's actually quite interesting because when Rand looked at prices, they found, and they were able to look at more specific pricing data versus averages misapplied. And Rand was able to see that in outpatient services, we pay at Reston Hospital 301% of what Medicare will pay. And then in Arlington, you're paying for outpatient services only 149% of what Medicare pays.
Well, I'm just trying to talk it through because Blue Cross Blue Shield and some of the others said there is no difference between what Fairfax would pay, what a insured would pay in Fairfax Hospital or Reston Hospital. Just something that definitely needs to be thought about here.
Again, the language in there is they did not dispute the language on charges. And
Hey, Michelle, Gary, this is Dennis.
Yeah, Dennis.
Hey, I'm glad you can hear me. I'm down at Fort Polk, Louisiana, with very limited connectivity and 2 phones and a laptop, and I'm holding one arm out the window. So I apologize if it's not too clear. Listen, I wanted to
care down there, Gary, Dennis. No, just kidding. No, go ahead.
I wanted to comment on this also, and look, I'm all in favor of lowering hospital prices and things, but I think it's entirely inappropriate that we start naming names of specific entities and comparing them one with another. This is a 5-year plan. It's supposed to last, and it's supposed to be very general. I mean, the purpose of what we're trying to do here, I'm fully in agreement with, but I think it's a terrible precedent, and I don't see that we do this anywhere else in the plan. I mean, do we compare one developer to another? Do we compare Loudoun County to Fairfax in terms of what they do or what they charge? So I would like to see us shift this around so we can make the point that more competition in the medical field would be a very good thing, and we strongly encourage additional medical institutions to come to Reston, but I'm very much opposed to naming names.
All right, Dennis, thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts on this for specifically any changes to the document that's before the group now?
Could I just, this is Bill, one other comment. I'm not going to try for a debate on word changes, but just a warning. When you put in language that something that is zoned for medical care must remain in medical care, it's a real disincentive for anybody else to seek zoning to provide medical services if they completely lose control of their property and are barred from doing something else in the future. They'll be reluctant. Having said that, I'm not going to argue for, I don't want to get in another wording argument, but just be wary.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Any other comments? I see, Shane, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I hate to keep popping up, but I would just add to that, and I missed a couple minutes to, but the whole notion of being specific with hospitals, whether it's Inova, whether it's Reston Hospital. I'm on the board of trustees for Dominion Hospital Falls Church, which is a psychiatric facility, and with COPN and all of that sort of thing that the state regulates, it's very difficult for a lot of these hospitals to get through that process. And certain types of facilities and certain types of services are subject to COPN. And so it's to a certain extent, in some cases, out of the facility's hands in terms of what the state at this point will approve. And so I think we may want to be a little more general about kind of where those specific beds or specific types of facilities might go. It might not even be Inova. It might be another facility that decide, or Reston Hospital might be another facility that decides to be able to provide these types of services. As COPN changes and evolves, there's a lot of these that are occurring in different locations, in terms of, the types of sports medicine, physical therapy, that sort of thing. They don't always occur within these facilities. And so I think we want to be careful and about, you know, saying what the actual services are that we are looking for, not who should provide them.
All right, Shane, thank you. Michelle, I don't see any other hands up. What is your pleasure at this point?
I think we can go ahead and vote on it.
Okay. Any objections to moving forward with the vote at this point?
Maybe a couple comments, John Carter.
Yes, John, thank you.
You know what? Maybe I'm wrong, but when I think of health, I don't think of facilities. I don't think of operations. I think of a lifestyle. And Reston has a Hall of Fame member of the NBA. It has the world record holder in the mile. It has a speed skater on the Olympics this time, and they all grew up here in Reston. And so there was something about the Reston lifestyle that produces this. And there's some of that in here. I just wonder if that's maybe should be a little bit bigger, beefed up. I'm not sure about these cost issues. It's difficult for the comp plan to be trying to dictate costs when really those costs come out of insurance companies and the hospitals themselves. So I don't know what wording it should be, but I think we should be careful. And I guess my third comment is I don't know about dumping all of this on staff to work these things out. I guess if the staff is volunteering and wants to do that, but I'm sure they have trepidations about some of these things. So we really haven't heard much from staff and what they think about this, but it's going to be quite a task for staff to unravel some of these things that I don't mind going beyond what a comp plan is, but I think we need to be careful. So anyway, I would have put more about the way we use Reston, the way we live in Reston, and what it has produced. We have wonderful sports and athletic tools here, all the way from little kids to adults. We have some of the best athletes in the world here. There's some reason that was produced. And I think the cost, it makes me pause about the cost issues and how to deal with that in a comp plan. Okay.
Okay, thank you, John. I see Jan has her hand up.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything, but I've heard this again and again and again, that if you want a place to go and die, Reston Hospital is the place to go. It has a horrible reputation. That's all I'll put in. It's really got a bad one.
Okay, all right. Well, Michelle, so you want to go to a vote at this point on interim approval, and I suppose let's see if it passes, then staff gets the next shot at making comments and suggestions, and then it comes back to the task force. Otherwise, we'll need to see if there are other changes need to be made to get a majority vote at the task force. Michelle, does that sound all right?
Well, I think that Jen and I are, this is it for us. We tried. We think that this is addressing health. We think we have addressed, some of the portions of active living. That's also an important thing for Parks and Recreation to be highlighted there as well. And I will say this on cost. I recognize that it's a bit different, but if we do not have affordable healthcare services, we do not have access to healthcare services. And I recognize too that many on this call have fantastic insurance, but not everyone in our community does. Also, those of us who, have businesses or who are employers recognize the significant cost of higher healthcare costs to businesses. So this is very much an economic issue too, from an employer standpoint. To overpay for healthcare. That's all I have to say. Either we want a community where we're getting high value healthcare, or we don't, and we say that we're not gonna take that on. But that's fine. we think that this is incredibly important, and we think that this is vital to have for a growing community. That's all I'll say.
Okay, and so Michelle, you want to go to a vote?
Can I make a comment, please?
Okay, Tammy makes a comment, then we go to vote. Unless
I would
Tammy
ask
says
that
no.
the vote to include the Mike Jennings language using the Barbara Byron proper phrasing that he okayed.
Tammy, I was wondering if anybody else would notice that.
I would like that included as part of, Mike had the screen, so Michelle was not able to type it in to correct it, but I think we have it on tape and we can put that in, but I make a motion to approve this plan.
Okay,
with
it's going to vote right now.
lingo.
So.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that
May I
motion's been made.
amend? I'd like to amend Tammy's motion.
Sure, but
or I
let's see
guess
if
we
there's-
need to go to a second, and then
Yeah, I
I'll
was gonna
make my
say, does
amendment.
somebody second that motion?
Robert's rules.
Yeah. Anybody want to second that motion, Tammy's motion?
Second.
Jan seconds it. Okay, discussion now. Go ahead, Lynn.
So I think that the points that John Carter made are integral to this chapter. And I would like to add a paragraph that does discuss the athletes that this community has produced from our environment. I know there are people who have moved to Reston that never intended to be athletes, but because of the offering that this community provides, they have become triathletes. And you know, they're not in the media, they're not in the press, but this community does offer a very healthy opportunity for folks. So I'd like to incorporate a paragraph. I'm sorry we don't have a pro golfer that we can add in there, but yeah, any of the, the ice skaters. And I just think that would be a real plus to this chapter. Thank you.
Lynn, just really
Okay.
quick to make sure though, I'm understanding, you will write that paragraph, right?
Yes.
Okay, so is that?
I'll work with John Carter to write that paragraph.
Okay, is that amendment a friendly amendment, Tammy and Jan?
Accepted.
Jan, it's okay as the seconder? Okay, all right.
Yes.
Okay, so that's part of the main motion then. So, but Lynn, you are on the hook to get that paragraph to somebody.
You got it.
Okay. Any other
Get her
discussion
done.
on the motion? Okay, if no other discussion, and I don't, Jose, do you see any hands up?
No, not yet. I was actually gonna do that. I know. I wasn't
Okay,
here
then
last
go
time,
ahead
so.
and do the voting thing.
I'll try my best, Supervisor. All right. So everyone in favor of Tammy and Lynn's and Jan seconding motion, have your hands up, and I'll count in 5, 4,
Well,
3. Oh, 2.
I don't know. I can't see. Are we vote? What are we?
We're voting on Lynn.
If you approve.
Tammy's motion to approve with a friendly amendment about adding a paragraph about the athletes, but also with Mike Jennings and the Barbara Byron a friendly edit for that one section that he had up earlier on. So, okay, so to approve the community health chapter, Gary.
I guess I don't know
Make
how
those
to.
changes.
Yeah, just those two changes. Okay, so I'll start counting hands now, so please keep them up. Saw a new hand, so I'll count that one as well. So I see 10 hands.
I agree.
Yep, 10 hands. Okay, so hands down, everyone.
I didn't see Gary's hand. Were you?
Gary, was
No,
that
having a problem?
I guess, yeah, I think I do, given the points John Carter made and the points Dennis made. Dennis just called me and said he's been cut off, but
Oh,
He wants to,
Okay, so
he wants
was
to.
Dennis in support as
Okay,
well?
just
Gary?
want to make
No,
sure
he's,
that you weren't intending to raise your hand and had a technical
I was,
glitch.
yeah, well, I did, Lynn. I
Well, so
guess,
Gary, Tammy, is that 11 with Gary's hand up?
No,
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 no, no,
no.
It's
no,
not.
His
Okay.
his hand was not up.
Okay.
no.
So Gary, do you want to have your hand up for this one or?
Is
No,
it
I
now
don't.
for?
No,
Okay.
no, I don't.
Okay.
Let's
Okay.
say
So
you two.
we'll do against and then we'll do abstentions. Okay. Glenn, I think your hand was up previously, right? Oh, it's gone. Okay. So we'll do those not in favor of Tammy, Lynn, and Jan second for the motion. Hands up, and I'll start counting in 5, 4.
I can't put my hand up. And
I'll
Dennis
note it,
can't
Gary.
either.
I'll note you and Dennis, Gary. Okay.
Okay, he's on the phone.
4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I see 3 virtual hands plus Gary and Dennis. That's 5. Am I missing anyone else on this one? Okay, hearing none. Clear hands, and then we'll do abstentions. Okay, those abstaining, please raise your hand, and I'll start counting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I see Bill Penniman and John Mooney. Were you abstaining as well? John?
Yes, I am, Jose.
Okay, okay. So 10, 4, 5 against, and 2 abstentions. Am I missing anybody? Hearing none. Supervisor and Michelle, that's 10, 4, 5 against, 2 abstentions.
Okay, Michelle, do you want to say any wrap up at this point? I know you put a lot of work into this one.
No, thank you. This is something that, Jen and I have a lot of experience in and really think is very important. So we look forward to, moving it forward, and hopefully we all get something that we like at the end.
Thank you for your work. For your
Yes, thank
years
you.
of work.
All right, very good. All right, well, let's move on now to the next item. And this is an initial discussion of earned density. And first of all, let me start off by saying, I know some of you have been putting your heads together on this, putting pen to paper. This is a new concept, and it's something, frankly, that we don't currently have in the comprehensive plan. But in this context, at this time in Reston, I think it's something that should be considered. And specifically, what I wanted to do tonight was to try to capture from task force members some basic ideas and to get those captured in a way that they could be at least potentially usable for draft earned density criteria for use by in the comprehensive plan. So some of the discussion that I've had with folks to date has revolved around basically a question of how these earned density would be used. And a fundamental piece that I think is important that we think about from the get-go on earned density is everything else that goes into the comprehensive plan would apply. Earned density would apply at some point beyond some base level of density, and it would be the way that developers could earn their way to the maximum density in the comprehensive plan. So where that lies, what elements should apply everywhere, or in this case, to every application, versus what elements, what criteria should apply only in the earned density context is a conversation that I'd like to hear the task force have and like to get feedback on. So again, this is still very early on, And Jose has put together basically a blank sheet of paper, except for a couple of columns and some places to put information. And this, I think, illustrates what I'm looking for. And during the discussion tonight, we can get, and I apologize for the small type. But on the left column, items required for all applications. And Jose, maybe we should change that to be more consistent with Barbara Byron language to say items expected from all applications. And then items for earned density. Why don't we just get rid of required? So the idea would be, and I'll just give an example. So one thing, and I actually had a conversation with staff about this some time ago when the concept of earned density came up. The idea that site design, good site design, should that be something that's associated with earned density? And after thinking about it and talking about it a little bit, that probably is not something that should be subject to earned density, but rather should apply and be expected for all applications. Good site design.
Walter, it may be my internet connection, but I didn't hear what you said as that first condition. Could you repeat that, please?
Sure, I'll go back a little bit. So the idea of how this might play out. Here's a question for the task force. So should good site design, should that be required or expected for all applications? Or should good site design be something that's a way for developers to earn towards the high end of the comprehensive plan density? So in that discussion, I heard some, basically opinions that, good site design should probably be required for all applications. So
isn't that part of the comprehensive plan?
Exactly. So, and that's what I think we need to have the conversation here is, and there's probably going to be more discussion for the column to the right, items for earned density, because you all have spent the last 42 meetings working on the column to the left. Okay. So now there may be some things that have been discussed that maybe are not expected for all applications that move into earned density for one reason or another. But I did want to make clear that for at least purposes of this discussion, and I think at least the folks that I've talked to seem to think that this construct makes sense. Let me ask if there are questions or comments at this point before we open it up for people to make suggestions on items for earned density.
Sir, I guess I was wondering if we could just talk about, I understood exactly what you just said. I think Lynn was also saying that the chapters themselves, as I understand it, have what is expected of all applications. Yep. And we have the principles, and then we're going beyond that. So I was wondering if we could just talk about the concept of earned density vis-a-vis the chapters and even, it's relationship to bonus density. And I thought maybe, John, or you could go through that before we did the list, or looks to me like we might be, going back to all the chapters here a little bit, and we could get over into the other column more easily if we went through the definition first. It just is my thoughts, sir. That's all.
Yeah, Gary, I think that's fine. I think that's fine to do that. And let me just throw out one other thing that I didn't mention in the second column. There may be some broad categories of things that are earned density. And the first one there, commitments that more than offset public facility impacts. And I would just note that in general, the comprehensive plan calls for developers to offset their impact on public facilities. That's why developers, frankly, write a check to the school system for residential units based on a formula the school system works. That's also why they make contributions to parks. We were talking earlier tonight about Reston Association pathways. those are in effect public facilities. So commitments that do more than just offset the impact of that development could be one whole category of items for earned density. And then Jose, go down a little bit, and then Gary will come back to your suggestion. So commitments that improve the social fabric of the community, basically giving back to the community. There might be some things there that maybe they've been talked about in some of the chapters. Maybe they're, nice to have things, or things that we'd like, but we don't think we could, require. Maybe some of those things show up here in commitments that improve Reston's social fabric. And then there may be other types of commitments, maybe environmental commitments that go above and beyond what's in the chapter. So yeah, Gary, go ahead if you want to start that discussion where you were, but I wanted to throw those categories up there too,
Right.
just so people could start to get their head around it.
Right, it's a great idea to have those categories. I thought maybe John could just go through earned density.
Is it possible to pin up what Lynn sent you? At least the initial part. And the initial part has a definition. We don't have to agree to the definite. Well, we should agree to a definition, but doesn't necessarily have to be that definition.
Yeah, we can do that, but we're violating our own rule of giving everybody 5 days in advance. But yeah, we can do that.
Well, I think the essence of it is that earned density only comes into play when you're above the lower end of the threshold. That's the difference. It does not come into play if you're below the bottom end of the threshold. I'm not sure everybody has a clear notion. And we have offered a couple areas that, just to make it even more clear, the threshold would be in the TOD areas. Density is expressed as a range, 13 to 20 units per acre. So 13, up to 13, earned density does not apply. Over 13 to get to the 20, the maximum, it does apply. Now, we also know there are lots of cases where there is no range expressed, it's just a total. And what we've said in the past is that 50% of the max is where the threshold would come into play. So there's 2 points there. One, earned density only applies when you're applying above the threshold. And then we have a couple ways to express what the threshold is. So I think that's the best I can do in terms of definition. That's what I'm throwing out there. We don't have to accept it, but that's what I'm throwing out there, is what the intent was.
I've offered to share my screen if
Lynn,
Jose doesn't have.
Yeah, Lynn, please do. And by the way, John, thank you for that explanation. So yeah, Lynn, do you want to lead the discussion on this?
Sure.
I have another point, Walter, that I might add. And I've thought of this just today, so not that it's so outstanding. I wonder if the categories could be the chapters, not the land use chapter, but say the transportation chapter, the open space chapter, the health, and maybe I'd add equity to health as a chapter, in the environmental chapter. Those would actually be the headings, and then we would put the categories underneath those headings. I'll just offer that as a suggestion. We don't have to do that now, but I would offer that might help us organize this a little pretty well, I think.
Yeah, John, I think that's a good idea. And of course, after the task force goes through this exercise, there will be a need to review the balance and emphasis. But that probably comes later in the process.
Yeah, that's what that would accomplish, I think, if you put the chapter headings as the categories.
Whoa.
It also ties it to the comp plan a little bit better. Anyway.
And John, could you talk about the relationship to bonus? And the reason I brought up the definition, sir, is I've heard people go around and round on getting their heads around this definition, and it's tough. This turns out to be a little kind of complicated. So,
well, I don't know if we should bring up bonus. Be careful, because to me, bonus is anything above the max. In most cases, but not all. Bonus has nothing to do with earned density, I guess is the best way. And we probably shouldn't confuse this with adding that
That's okay. I just hear people get wrapped around on the definition. So as long as everybody
Density is
understands
not
it.
is not a bonus in planning terms.
Okay.
Bonus, a best example of that is the WDUs or ADUs. You automatically get a bonus depending on the percentage that you provide. That is bonus density. And that allows you to go above the maximum.
It
But
seems
even
that
if you're not,
it seems that it might be good though to look at the other document and start talking about what are some things that we would want that would not be included in the expected list, right?
I don't know if there's anything that wouldn't be in the expected list.
Lynn, can you put back up the chart?
So if I could,
Yeah, please, because actually there's a lot that's in the beyond that. But yeah, go ahead.
okay, so we'll, just because there's so much.
I was trying to be helpful and not to add more discussion. I was trying to be helpful to this and not make it more confusing.
So let's see, am I able to share?
Yeah, there's the definition that I would use for, and I'll just throw that on the table and change it if you want, but at least I think it's pretty clear.
Well, frankly, nobody could
I
read that.
hope you're not asking for us to
No.
comment on something we have still never seen.
Yes, I understand that.
Lynn, the top one is not, the document is not completely visible.
Okay, let me reshare.
It's the main point there is it's earned density applies only to go above the lower end of the range. That's the essence of this.
Okay, you're up.
Earned density is defined as the difference between the lowest end of the defined range and the highest density expressed in the comprehensive plan or zoning ordinance. Remember, sometimes the density is not expressed in the comp plan, it's only in the zoning ordinance. That's the key sentence.
Yeah, John, is it the difference? Is earned density the difference between the lowest point in the range and the highest?
Yes.
Or is earned density that part of that range which one has earned?
Pull up.
There's a difference.
I don't have Jose's no, yeah, I'm not able to pull up Jose.
You're good. Your document is good. Your audio is going in and out.
So again, any density above the lowest range must be earned.
Correct.
Stop sharing and then reshare. Share.
It's good.
So John, the only point I was trying to make is there's a difference between.
No, we're not. What we want to do is this is
There's a difference
right, so
between.
Is...
Am I being heard?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
There's a difference between the potential earned density and let's say and actual earned density. So actual earned density is the difference between the lowest point in the density range and what I have earned. That's my earned density. It's the Carter-Mooney Corporation earned density. That's different from the potential maximum density. So I would not define earned density as the difference between the low point in the range and the high point. That's the potential earned density. Actual earned density is what, as I say, the Carter Mooney Corporation earned by their whatever
Right.
they did to earn it.
Right.
You're right.
The key point is the starting point. That's the key point, and whether you accept that. And I think that's critical going into this.
So
some would think the starting point is 0.
John, my
Some,
question for you is
you're breaking up, Lynn. You're breaking up.
you're changed the word.
Your audio is
wording
breaking up, Lynn.
in this description to better.
Your audio is still breaking up somewhere.
We cannot hear or understand you.
So this is Looney. Maybe while Lynn is trying to figure out the audio, let me ask a question. Just I guess 2 questions relative to how this gets implemented in the real world, because that's really what I'm trying to focus in on. It sounds like we're moving towards some sort of scorecard where there's a chart that you add up. Here are the ways that I'm complying with 14 or 16 chapters of the comprehensive plan's provisions, and I get so many points for that. But that only gets me to the low end of the density range. And to get to the high end of the density range, or better yet, anywhere above the low end of the density range, I have to do something that's not set forth in the comprehensive plan. And I guess the other places where I've seen perhaps constructs that could be described as similar to this would be the Fairfax Center area as an example. The Fairfax Center area, which covers Fair Lakes, Fair Oaks, and some of the surrounding areas, has a baseline recommendation. And the baseline recommendation is for X. And then they have an overlay recommendation that says you can get above the baseline if you do the following things. And there are recommendations in for how you move from the baseline to the overlay district. But the planning principle, or I'll call it the plan recommendation, is for the baseline. And only if you earn your way up to the overlay level do you get to the overlay level. In this circumstance, the baseline is not the low end of the density range. It is, in fact, a range. And so I don't know how you make a distinction between what you get if you do everything that's set forth in the comprehensive plan, but you only get to the low end of the range. How that, if there's not a clear distinction between the baseline and the overlay, I don't know how you implement this in the real world. And I guess that's what I'm struggling with is, like, if you're planned for a range, yes, it is a political decision as to where you shake out on that range. But I don't know that you can say that you're not eligible for the upper end of the range if you've otherwise satisfied or earned enough points on the scorecard to get there.
John,
so I don't know how to advise people about how that works in the real world. I guess that's my point.
Mark, you raised some good points, and I think the Fairfax Center item is probably worth looking at. But the point is, we're talking about putting this in the comprehensive plan, so it would be part of the plan.
Yeah, and if I could just, if you all can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, if I could just answer Mark's comments, I think that the idea here is that in order to qualify to move above the minimum density, is that every applicant needs to meet the planning principles that are set forth in the comprehensive plan. So in order to, and those are the 12 principles that are outlined. But I think that we have found that, the comprehensive plan principles have been severely taken for granted and have not been adhered to.
Lynn, I respectfully disagree with that. What you're saying is that the prior supervisor or supervisors, plural, didn't apply them in the same way you would. Because there was still a finding of a recommendation of conformance with the comprehensive plan in every circumstance I'm aware. And there was still in all the staff reports, I don't say there weren't any, but I suspect that the overwhelming majority of applications had a recommendation of approval as being in conformance with the comprehensive plan, or they would never have come forward. Now you can argue about whether a particular
you're right,
application should have been approved by the
You're
political
right.
body, but it's not the fault of the applicant if the board otherwise approved it. I think my concern is that it's an impossible thing to know from an implementation standpoint to say that I'm planned for, I think the example earlier was 13 to 20 dwelling units per acre. I'm planned for 13 units per acre. I 100% do everything in the 12 principles plus the 722 musts that are going to end up in the comprehensive plan. I do all of those things. And I'm entitled to 13 units per acre under that plan. And then I have to turn around and do 15 or 20 other amorphous things to get to the same density range that I'm planned for. And I think, I haven't seen the land use chapter or the updates to it, but I think if you're going to go to this concept, you have to make a greater distinction between what a property is planned for and what its potential is. Because you can't say I'm planned for 13 to 20, but I can't get to the 20 unless I do something that's above and beyond what every other application has to go through. I mean, it's the Fairfax Center example, right? You're either planned for 13 or you're planned for 20, but you can't be planned for both under the same comprehensive plan, unless there's a clear distinction between the expectations at 13 and the expectations at 20. And I don't know that you're going to get a lot of applicants that are going to come forward with 16 chapters and 722 must requirements and propose anything above the minimum unless there's better clarity as to what's the delta between the baseline and the overlay.
Well, I think the earned density chapter, and I know this is brand new to everyone, and we apologize, but we've been working on this, and it's a very complex item to tackle. But if you would please, just hear us out and give it. I know the initial reaction, Mark. I understand it, but please give this your, just give it consideration. And we think that this provides the community of Reston with a way to really benefit the community in ways that will also benefit the developers that are coming to Reston. So if I could continue, Walter, or if there are other folks that want to.
Lynn, go ahead. Keep, if you could, I know there's some hands up, but keep going. And then if you could call on folks, if you can see them.
Okay. So if I could just pick up from where John Carter left off. As you can see, the description, the first paragraph here, and of course we can make adaptations to this, but earned density only applies to calculating the allowed density expressed in FAR in the TOD and non-TOD areas of the transit station areas and throughout Reston. So to skinny this down for everyone, the concept is that applicants would need to at least meet the requirements of the comprehensive plan in order to enter into an earned density consideration. So they would meet the planning requirements, move into the baseline density. So if it's expressed in dwelling units, using Mark's example, 13 to 20, they would come in at 13. If it's expressed in FAR, as you can see, that's calculated in a range from 50% of the maximum to the maximum density indicated in the comp plan or zoning ordinance. So that's of FAR. And what we are trying to do is we're trying to say there are certain items in the comprehensive plan that are required. That doesn't enter into this equation. The items that enter into this equation are those elements that are important to the community that would earn developers or builders additional density moving up towards that 20 dwelling units by providing items that the community needs, such as providing, the first item here is providing 3-bedroom units and larger within multifamily housing units. So we don't know how that equation is going to work out. Do you get, you know, a 10% bonus? What is that? But the item, I mean, the question is, what are those items that are not required in the chapters of the current comprehensive plan that the community needs and would provide developers and builders with an opportunity to gain additional density? So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down so that folks can have an opportunity to see what the working group was thinking. And
Lynn, can you broaden that
Sure.
screen a bit? Can you zoom in a little bit with that slide on the lower right? There you go. There you go.
More? Is that good, David?
Yeah, that's better. You don't want to take yourself there. That's even better.
There?
That's even more better.
Okay. Good. Yeah, so, you know, I mean, this is not the be all end all. The intent this evening was really to introduce the concept to the task force. What we have developed here is really kind of an outline of the goals and justification for earned density, and then the tactics that may be utilized to meet those goals and objectives. Now, we understand that there are chapter leads that we, the task force, have not seen that final chapter end product. So we don't know what is required. And that's the key word, is what is required within the chapters of the comprehensive plan, because any item that is required will be eliminated from this list. So,
and for chapter leads, I think, you know, what is required, you just have to look at those closely, because the word difference could lead you to consider putting that over the category of earned density, even though you said, you know, something about it. But is it required in the chapter? And for everybody to think about that.
So here's an example. So if you look at tactic number B, as boy. So if you look at tactic number B, we know that developers are able to earn bonus density, providing ADUs and WDUs. So what they can do is they can get earned density above and beyond by providing ADUs in excess of the zoning ordinance. So, or WDUs in excess of the Reston comp plan. So if someone like Chuck Beach were to go in at Aperture, that's an elevator unit. It is not stick built. It is, a steel high rise. If a developer were to go in and say, I'm going to provide ADUs in my high rise, this is way above and beyond what the zoning ordinance requires, then that would provide that developer with earned density points.
So Lynn,
Does that
I
make
think
sense?
the good side of that is that's clearly written, I think. So if you're above the required, then you're going to get some amount of earned density.
Right.
Our system now is you have to work with planning and zoning, or you have to work with some crazy planning commissioner, or you have to work with the board of supervisors on figuring out how much on negotiating the amount of ADUs. This would make it clearer. If you do the minimum, you get the lower end of the range. If you do more, then you can earn some more density. So if we
Right.
could write a lot of them that way, and it's not going to be possible to write all of them that way, that makes things clearer, I think. And I'm trying to address what Mark is concerned about, because I think that's the crux of this in many ways. So B and D we probably know what the minimums are. Rather than negotiating it with any of the bodies that we have to deal with, you would get an amount of earned density. So it makes it clear in that sense.
Exactly.
Lynn, this is
Right.
David.
And-
Let me
and-
ask you a couple of questions about that.
Hi, David.
So if
Yep.
if you're talking about density in the residential area, density in the village center, density in the TSAs, and currently it calls for 8% gives you a bonus density of up to 12, or in the TSAs, a 12% gives you a bonus density up to 20%. So is B saying that they can, a developer with the proper proposal could come in and exceed those stated percentages in the housing chapter?
You could exceed
A developer could come in and get more than 20%
requirement. You could get
bonus
more
density
workforce
in the
housing.
TSA.
You can't get more than the total allowed. You can't get more than the upper end of the range, but you can get more. This would be a way for you to get above the minimum. And it's a way the community gets more WDUs or ADUs, as the case may be.
Right.
And it would be, once this gets done, we would have some factor that would figure all that out, how much earned density.
So John, this is Mark again.
Yeah.
So right now, the comp plan has a range, right? So it's 3 to 4, 1 to 2, whatever the range is.
In the TOD areas, yes.
Wherever, yeah, it could be residential density elsewhere.
Yeah.
Right now, where I fall on that range is based on a host of factors that are determined by the comprehensive plan, largely based around conformance with the various policies, contributions, green building, workforce housing, et cetera, et cetera. And some of it is what the developer proposes to do. John Sekas, for example, did the baseline at 30 dwelling units to the acre on his projects on Sunrise Valley Drive. By contrast, Boston Properties went to a 4.0 or close to a 4.0 at their site at Reston Gateway. But all of that was determined based on their conformance with the comprehensive plan policies writ large. Then the comprehensive plan today provides the ability to go above and beyond the maximum range, in Boston Properties case of 4.0 FAR, if they perform certain extra obligations, dedicated right-of-way for needed transportation improvements, increase their workforce housing contribution, et cetera. as I understand this, Boston Properties' new maximum density, just using them as an example, is not 4, it's 3. And that the only way that they get above a 3, even though their range is from 3 to 4, is to provide the elements that used to be considered for bonus density above and beyond the 4.0. They now have to do those things to get above the 3.0. Is that the way this is intended to work?
I hesitate saying yes, because that's too simple.
But I think it's ADUs and WDUs
in
as
the writing
bonus.
these, so.
Right, but I mean,
properties
it's
would
that way
not-
now, right? There's
Yeah,
half a
but-
dozen examples in the comprehensive plan that talk about what you can do to get bonus density above and beyond the maximum range, the maximum end of the range in the comprehensive plan. And it sounds like what we're doing is inverting that and now saying to get above the low end of the density range, you need to do those things as opposed to getting above the high end of the density range.
Yeah, and Mark, I think one piece of it, if whoever, I guess Lynn has the screen, could scroll down. I think one piece of the answer to that, Mark, relating to housing is at the very bottom of this, which I realize the task force hasn't seen. There.
Walter.
Mark, I don't know if that helps or not.
While Mark contemplates that, let me make a comment, if I could. I think it's difficult for us to make heads or tails of this without seeing the land use section. And it is also difficult for us to make sense of it without actually going back and rereading things that have been approved, because must didn't really seem like that big a deal. Now it's a big deal. I'll tell you my concern, and I think actually you voiced this once before, a few months ago maybe, that earned density, as you had seen it implemented someplace, simply meant everybody stayed at the bottom end. In the world we're in today, we need real density near the subways. It's the only way to make it work. It's the only way for the three-legged stool of people, businesses, retail, offices, and transit to work. If you pull out one of them, like the people, then the rest collapses, and we end up with a dead zone around the metros, which I think would be tragic. And I think in this world of climate change, the one thing that we know, or one of the things we know, and I think the county has known this for a while, is getting density around transit in urban walkable neighborhoods is the key. And what I fear is that the result is simply going to be to squash people down at the bottom, and for the next 50 to 100 years, undersized buildings will be the only thing we have. And the dream of really effective walkable urban neighborhoods with the kind of retail that would be supported and mutually support each other will fade, and we'll have empty storefronts. And so we need to see the bigger context, but I'm really worried that that's where this is headed. And I think Mark's question.
Can I just say, Bill, it's not my intent to restrict development to the low end. That's not my intent.
No,
I understand it's not your intent. I'm just worried that the way this structure is emerging, that will be the effect.
Understood.
And the county's goal, and what should be our goal, of making something vibrant that will benefit all of us, will fail. So
no, I agree. Thank you, Bill. I just wanted to make sure everybody heard that that's not my intent.
I understand.
Yeah. Walter,
real quick,
if I
on
could
the
just
bonus-
add something here. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I was just bonus density. I read that. I guess what I'm confused about is that seems to just be echo current ADU and WDU policies are, which is that in exchange for providing those units, you get bonus density to offset the subsidies that are being extended providing the units. That's a different construct than the bonus density that's in the current comprehensive plan, which is talking about if my obligation was to do, or my policy recommendation was to do 12% workforce housing, and I elect to do 15% voluntarily, that I'm compensated for the extra 3% by being able to go over the high end of the density range, which is a different construct than the compensation owed to property owners simply for the provision of subsidized units. And I want to make sure that we're not conflating those two concepts with this.
Thank you, Mark. Good points.
Can I just comment that I don't think the intent of earned density or what we're doing in the chapters are, going the way you're talking about, Bill. That's not what's happening here. I think we're doing, we're following the previous plan. We're going into the detail to make sure everything is nailed down. There may be a few changes, but nobody's trying to do what you suggested in what we did before or in earned density. And again, maybe John, you add a few words back in relation to what Mark is talking about with the 4 and the 3 on Boston properties.
Well, again, I just want to echo what Walter is saying, and not for the obvious reason, but the intent is not to decrease the density. This is not a down planning exercise. So anything
Right.
on the list, those should be fairly easy to get. The impression is you're developing things that are more than you have to get because of the way our rules are structured. But are easy to get to the maximum. This is not a down planning exercise. And I recognize the proof is in the writing of these. And the second point, a little more minor, is to stop this negotiating that particularly these crazy planning commissioners do, negotiating over these things, to make it a little more straightforward on what you do to get the density that you're planned for. And I think the ADUs and WDUs is the case in point. We negotiated down lower tiers and higher percentages on almost all the cases in the last 4 years. This would end that in a way, because it would give you an obvious way to get the density that you truly want. But again, just to emphasize it again, this is not to be a down planning exercise. These should be things that everybody wants and are relatively easy to get. So I'm not sure what else I can say. Does that match, Walter? What? Yeah.
It does. John, I'm not sure we're ever going to get out of the crazy planning commissioner negotiation, but
probably not, especially with this one.
Well, I think if I could just pick up, I think that what we were hoping to do this evening was to go to the chapter leads and ask what items or what elements in this earned density scheme or the program, what elements are already required in the respective chapters, and any of those elements that are required, we will remove from the earned density elements because they're already required. And then we wanted to go back to, and I'll turn this back over to Jose, turn this back over to the chapter leads to say, what are the elements that are so important to the Reston comprehensive plan that have not been identified that we need to include in an earned density forum or calculation that will bring more to the community and really help us partner more with the development community in providing more to Reston. So it's more of a partnering opportunity as opposed to a down zoning or whatever you all want to call it. We really want to partner.
Lynn, there are a few hands up. I recommend it's almost 9 o'clock. I recommend let's go through those hands and then continue this on another night because we do need to wrap up.
Okay. Thank you for giving me the floor.
No, absolutely. And so let's just go through that. And I'm going to start from the bottom. Shane, and then Myra. Myra, you've been very patient. Your hand's been up a long time. And David Vanel.
And I just want to, again, I know I'm being a pain tonight, but just add that context I think Mark was trying to drive at, which is it may not be intended as a down planning, but it may be the effect depending on what criteria are used. I mean, I'm looking, I don't have the document in front of me, so I'm a little bit at a loss, but I'm looking at some of these things like provide a health plex. I mean, that's not an easy thing for me to proffer into something, right? Because I don't know if I can do it. Adding public facilities that are greater than the overall impact of the project. I think we're talking about things that are very specific in some cases and less general than we typically see in a comprehensive plan. Tyson's was one example of where there was enough specificity in there, but also enough play, if you will, to have those negotiations and to come up with a product or a project that, that could work. And when we're dealing with mostly, stick-built 5- and 6-story apartment buildings in the multifamily side, as well as some high rises, those high-rise buildings, if you're adding too much into them, the costs are already exponentially higher, and you're pushing people out of high-rise range, right? So if you want those high rises that are already so expensive, there's some challenges to me with that. I'd really like to see the document, be able to look it over, but I think to me it looks very specific, and I'm not sure that that's really going to get Reston what it wants, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Shane. Let's go to Myra, and then I skipped over Michelle. Myra, then Michelle, and then David Vanel.
Oh, thanks. I wanted to address your comment, Bill. Is it Bill Penniman? When I think about the metro stations, I don't feel like they all have to be completely jam-packed with density. I mean, maybe of course you want to encourage ridership and metro use, but I mean, I think about cities like London, Barcelona. We've lived in many places, and not every metro station or tube station had the same amount of density surrounding it, and it still supported the metro or the tube, equally. So I just feel like you don't have to have each metro station jam-packed. I mean, some of those stations I think about, had maybe just businesses around it. When I think of like Broadgate in London, it was really a financial district. Almost nobody lived there. Or you think about places in London where the tube services neighborhoods with actual homes rather than high rises. So I don't think we need to be jam-packing every single metro station just to keep metro viable. It will be viable once we get it toward the airport and in airport in use. So I don't think we need to think about it like that. I mean, it's maybe just me. But the other thing I wanted to ask is, I think it's an interesting concept. What I would like to know, and I'm sure you're giving a lot of thought to, is how you measure it. If you go to that list, and I would love to study it a little bit longer, but like, let's say Mark Looney and I are both developers, and we want to, we've met everything in the comprehensive plan, and he's looking for the easy way out, saying, I'm just going to put in a couple sidewalks because you mentioned sidewalks, and then I'm stuck with a healthplex. So I just wonder, like, how you measure, like, each one of those and how much density each one of us is going to get. Or maybe he and I want to go in together on something 50-50, or, I just wonder how you're going to measure healthplex versus sidewalks versus a public library versus, I would be very curious to see that matrix as how that's going to be utilized going forward.
Myra, thank you for flagging basically one of the most critical issues with this whole discussion.
Yes,
so,
right.
Please keep thinking about that. Michelle next, and then David.
Yeah, I have one request, and I think it's that, it's really easy to go through and say, no, 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 no. I think that the next step with this effort is, we have a couple of steps, but one of them is going to be to figure out the exact formula and exactly how it works. But the next step that we're all being asked to do is, what do we want to see in Reston? What do we need? And I'm hopeful that instead of just going through items that others have suggested and saying no and poking holes, people can use this opportunity to really come up with some ideas. And that applies hopefully to everyone. And I would just like to see a more collaborative effort of thinking about the future of Reston. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Good suggestion. And let's go to David.
Thank you, sir. I find this extraordinarily complicated and frankly not very well explained yet. Now, maybe after everybody's had a chance to read it this week, and we can discuss it next week. But for me, in housing, the comment that at the bottom of that you have to for the ADUs and WDUs. The developer has to meet the earned density standards before they can apply the bonus density standards. It seems to me that in that regard, the housing chapter oxen are being gored here. I don't see how that works. I don't understand how there's any incentive for a developer to go beyond the minimum. And therefore our affordable and workforce housing process is going to suffer. I know John says this is not a down planning exercise, but it sure smells like that. And in addition, maybe part of the problem is that earned density for most of the literature that talks about affordable housing and that stuff, earned density and bonus density are equivalent. There's no earned density is not a concept, at least in the literature, that equates to what you're doing here. Earned density is bonus density, whether you look in California or Oregon or Vermont or North Carolina or South Carolina or Florida. When you research those two terms, what you come up with is bonus density. And so I'm really skeptical that this is translatable into a useful concept to guide land use here.
Well, David, you may be right. We may not get through this, but let's see. And actually, with that in mind, let's do move on. Lynn, why don't you go ahead and send around the document that you had worked on at some point, or Jose can send it around. Or if you want to make any updates before you send it around, that's fine. And I believe, Lynn, you also said early in the meeting that on Thursday you would get the land use chapter around.
Yes, so at the beginning of the meeting, I did offer that we are putting together a package of land use materials that includes the final red line, the updated InDesign that includes the graphics and the captions, as well as the comments that were provided to every single individual that provided us with comments that weren't necessarily part of edits to the chapter, but they had just general comments. So we wanted to share those with the rest of the task force. And yes, we will get those out on Thursday. But I don't know if I had any comments on how we could adapt that first paragraph of our earned density chapter, but I'll check with John Mooney. I think he had some good ideas, and we'll get those made and send that out to the group as well.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Obviously, there's more to talk about on earned density. So
Of course.
Thank you for getting that out.
Say, Walter.
Sure.
Walter, just
Yes,
one
John.
comment. This is a little off the wall. It says crazy planning commissioner again. In terms of the land use, there is only upzoning in the new land use plan. There is no downzoning, unless we've done something by mistake, but there's only some minor upzoning, no downzoning, down planning, no down planning in the land use plan.
Does that include Reston Town Center North, John?
Yeah, it does. I would say so.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, we look forward. I think everyone looks forward to seeing that. And I think actually,
and I do want to, sorry, Walter, for
Please.
interrupting, but I do want to thank everyone that provided their comments and their edits. We had asked for that and folks delivered. So thank you so much. And we'll get those out to folks.
well, thank you, Lynn. And John, thank you for those comments too. Let's go. I do want to hit, well, Tammy, you have your hand up and then we're going to go to schedule.
Thank you. Bill Penniman, I think we're ready for looking at and voting on environment and environmental stewardship, right? So you can
Yeah,
put
we'll
that.
have it. We'll circulate it this week.
Yes, so that'll be available whenever the schedule allows. I know where land use will be a long explanation, but stewardship is ready to roll. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. John? John, did you have something?
Mooney or
Okay.
Carter?
Yeah, sorry, I thought John Carter.
No, I don't have anything else to say.
Okay. All right, thank you, Tammy. Jose, if you could put the schedule up. Okay, and this is good. We just have a few more minutes. Let's I think to walk through this. Now, I know we've had different schedules slip. You know, we were going to try to wrap up by last summer and then by last month. We're getting close to the point where really the schedule cannot slip anymore. Let's just walk through this. This assumes that, which is maybe impossible at this point, that in 2 weeks, the task force chapters will be transmitted to county staff. And actually, let's go to the very bottom, Jose, and then we'll come back up. So this would put us basically October for Planning Commission, or sorry, for Board of Supervisors public hearing. I would just remind everybody that 2023 is an election year, and we're not going to do a land use change of this size in an election year. So we have a hard deadline. So let's go back up to the top. And as you can see, we have several key elements. Obviously, interim approval by the task force, which needs to happen as soon as possible. We have some initial outreach to various Reston organizations, maybe some other folks in the community that my office would be happy to do. And by the way, I'll ask for comments or questions after we go through this quickly. Staff in February, again, assuming February 1st, task force finalization. Basically, we'll start pulling the language into comp plan format that's already not in comp plan format, graphics and tables, and using task force chapters and noting any differences. And then March, staff provides last of their high-level comments to task force subcommittees. So basically, there's a month between the task force wrapping up and then the staff coming back and flagging high-level concerns with any task force recommendations. Then in March, task force actions or meetings, if any, in response to basically staff feedback or comments from any of the initial public outreach. Then we're looking at mid-April, staff provides revised draft comp plan language. And then May through July, community outreach. And there's probably a missing step in there as well. The task force probably will need maybe towards the end of April, one final review of the task force recommendation. Then we go into staff report preparation. We are into full-scale community outreach and engagement throughout the summer. Staff report goes in July, or sorry, on August 8th. And then basically Planning Commission hearing on September 14th, Board of Supervisors on October 11th. Lynn, I saw your real hand up. Yes, go right ahead. You're muted, I think, Lynn. Lynn, actually, we still can't hear you. Wait, try it again. Try to unmute.
Sorry.
There you go. That's okay. There you go. That's it.
So I had two questions. Is there any way to crash and fast track the schedule? And then the second question that I had is, is there any way to get this completed and before the Board of Supervisors ahead of this schedule?
I guess there are. I'll just speak to the one thing that I guess I have more. The one thing that I care very deeply about is the community outreach and engagement. I don't want to collapse that. I mean, right now we basically have the summer, but I would actually go to staff and ask if there's what staff's thoughts are in terms of collapsing any parts of this. I'll put who can I put on the spot on staff?
Walter, I'll take it.
Is that Barbara?
Hi.
Yeah, thank you.
This is St. Clair.
St. Clair.
I can say from the staff,
Oh,
you know,
St. Clair. All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, St. Clair.
I'd rather, can I do it? It's Barbara.
Guess I'm also having some bandwidth issues tonight. Can you hear me?
Yeah, St. Clair, why don't you let me take it?
Yep. Barbara, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we spent a lot of time looking at doing exactly what you've asked for, Lynn. You know,
I'm sorry,
we would like to get it. We would like to get it done as well, but we have compressed it. It's frankly compressed to a point I'm a little nervous about meeting the schedule, particularly because it's so important to do the community outreach, but also the issues of making sure that the language that gets out ultimately to the board is good language that we can all live behind. It's going to take a little bit of time. So I want you to understand that we have really tried to look at ways to make it shorter, but the community outreach component and some of the work that the staff has to do to turn the language around and make sure that it's vetted. And, you know, there's a lot of discussion tonight about working with the county attorneys and that sort of thing. We don't see a way really to make it shorter. And again, we would like to make it as short as possible, but I'm kind of nervous about even meeting the schedule.
Did everybody capture that? I think I captured it.
Yeah,
Lynn,
yeah.
could you hear that?
Yes, Supervisor Alcorn, I have to go make one comment. We have been sending things to the staff. You know, chapters have gone and so forth. So I hope that would speed this up, you know, significantly to help us make this.
Yeah. Thank you, Gary, and we really appreciate that.
Oh, there you go, Barbara. That's better.
Yeah, we appreciate that, and we the problem, as many of you have expressed tonight, is any of us have not seen a whole package. So we're really waiting to see the whole package together. But we do appreciate the fact that many of the subcommittees work with us, and we're in really good shape on quite a number of them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm
Gary.
signing off.
Okay, all right, Gary, thank you. We're almost done. I see David. David, you have your hand up. Is that an old hand or a new hand?
Sorry, it's an old hand.
Okay, no problem. It's a good looking hand though. All right, and I did see there was Lynn, you had or actually Michelle has her hand up. I think that's a new one.
Yeah, Walter, I'm just wondering, you know, you mentioned that we should have the task force review again and that was missing from the schedule. if we could just update this to make sure it's included, because I think that's
Yep.
one of the issues that we have when looking at this, is it looks like staff takes over rewriting and final say. And I just want to make sure we have clarification on that.
Okay,
Excellent
and there
point.
was
Thank you,
a
Michelle.
similar, I think, suggestion in the chat from Jennifer. Jennifer, did I capture that right? It looks like it. And Jennifer may only be able to chat right now and maybe not speak.
I'm just saying the high level staff comments I think can be sent to the whole task force, just to the listserv. That way, if a subcommittee wants to reactivate to work with staff, they can. But it keeps us all on the same page as to the status of a chapter. So when we regroup, we're not, coming from different angles or have had different meetings with staff outside of the task force.
Okay.
And I
Jen.
personally would really like to see the community engagement or community outreach start in March. I think that it's okay for the community outreach to start while staff is looking at the drafts, because it incorporates feedback while we're actively editing chapters.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that could be really helpful. That could happen. Other comments? Is there any other hands that are up on the schedule?
Well, wait, I guess I do just want to maybe to just make sure the understanding is correct, that so we will have, it says that staff provides a revised draft, but it doesn't say that we will meet and discuss the draft and provide any additional edits or have any discussions about edits staff made.
And that would be,
That's
okay.
That's in between April and May.
Yeah. So I guess, Jose, can you put in maybe end of April, task force reconvenes to basically review final recommendations, right? Or final task force report. Is that good, Michelle?
Yeah, just as long as, we'll have ability to weigh in again. I mean, I think there is sometimes a concern that staff could change it dramatically.
Right.
So what was that again, Supervisor?
Task force reconvenes, our task force final report. Right, that's a task force activity. Okay, any other issues with the schedule at this point or questions? Okay, I would just note, again, this does assume February 1st. We've only got 2 more meetings scheduled. We still have all of land use. Earned density obviously is still going to require some work, or at least some discussion. Then we need to vote on housing. We need to vote on environment. And then we still need to do an equity lens. I guess my question is, we're looking at doing weekly meetings. Do we need to do more in order to get, even close to the February deadline? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Any other ideas?
One thing I would suggest, John Carter, I think we should continue working with staff as much as possible. There may be points of significant differences, but there may be differences that are not either not significant or unintended. And so I think we should all continue to work with staff and try to work out some of these differences. Maybe we won't get all of them, but continue pressing to work with staff to make this work, and that will shorten the overall time if we go in with that intent.
Okay. All right. Well, one last idea. Thank you, John. I think that's a good suggestion. One last issue. We might want to look to do 3-hour meetings for these last two task force meetings to see if we can get things wrapped up, or at least very close to being wrapped up. So let's just plan on that. Plan on going to 10 o'clock. We've been going past 9 o'clock anyway. And if everyone could move forward with getting the versions out or these drafts out. Thank you, Lynn, for doing that for 2 different areas. And then Tammy, I know, is going to get out in environment, David Bennell on housing. So yes, let's wrap these up. Any final thoughts or questions before we break tonight?
Walter, this is David Bennell. On the staff review of the chapters that are sent to them, would it be too disruptive of staff or for staff to perhaps have the staff call in or have a Zoom meeting with the authors of the chapters to provide the high level feedback and get some of that discussion out of the way? Because I fear that if staff sends back stuff and people don't like what they see, we're going to be in an unending, a never-ending supply of meetings to work through that. I'm not sure why we have to check staff's work, frankly. Very much like I'm not sure why we should be checking the community's comments. But is it possible to maybe short circuit some of this by having staff engage directly with the writers of the chapters? I mean, I've been working with staff, for months now, and they seem perfectly willing to sit down and educate me. So maybe that would save us a little bit of time.
Yeah, thank you, David. Does anyone on staff have any response to that?
Yeah, Walter, it's Barbara again.
Barbara, please.
I'm sure, yes, I'm sure that would be fine. I mean, it seems like a very efficient way that we've been working so far. So I would see no reason not to continue doing that. Clearly, there are some issues that maybe, the task force as a whole would want to weigh in on, but we would, I think, welcome the opportunity to work in the smaller groups with the subcommittees.
So this is Michelle. I think some of this should be in a public discussion. I'm sorry, but I don't think that, at this point, we need to get edits in writing, and we should be able to review the edits as a whole group.
So I think what will probably end up there is, for some chapters, for chapter leads or topic leads that are comfortable, like what David's doing with staff, then do it that way. I think, Michelle, for things that you're working on, it sounds like you would want it to come back and have the full task force. And I think that option should always be there.
What I'm saying is that I think that at this point, we're producing things that have been voted on, and we can get written edits. That's what we need.
Okay.
And I agree.
Okay.
So
So yes, and David, I think at the end of the day, you'll probably, in addition to the calls that you're having, you'll probably have some written edits as well. Maybe just they may be more familiar when you see them. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on process, schedule? Okay. All right. Well, we will be reaching out. Jose, also Lisa in my office is going to be helping with outreach. We do want to get basically the topic leads or the chapter leads to help with the PowerPoint slides that can be used in the outreach process. Not a whole lot of stuff, but basically just a few points, the high level points from the areas that you've been working on, the topics that you've been working on. We'll be reaching out in the office. We'll reach out to the different topic leads on that. And then, of course, we'll make sure that the whole task force sees anything before it goes out into public outreach. We'll also be needing to do this collaboratively. So I want to, again, as I've mentioned before, I know this is meeting 42. It's been a tremendous amount of commitment that each of you has shown towards this process, and I do appreciate that. But I do want to also have as many of you as possible participate in the public outreach effort. So I think it's very important that those of you that have been working on this report, and those of you that have been really thinking about this and talking with folks and getting educated, are available to answer questions and give rationales when asked about different parts of the task force recommendation. So we'll be following up on that. Any final comments, questions before we wrap up? Okay, all right, well, 9:28. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Walter.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Walter.
Thanks, Jose.
All right.